And I just burned the heck out of
How
myself
old,
the
how
other
old are
day.
your kids?
8, 5, and newborn.
Okay, wow, yeah.
So I see the whole thing, right? Um, but let's say, I'm trying to think of a scenario, and you probably have a better story. Let's say I go through something traumatic. Let's say I, excuse me. Let's say I get married and my spouse cheats on me, or I don't know, something really terrible. There's abuse or something like that, right? And so there's trauma there, and we get divorced or something really horrible happens. And now that's hanging with me, and I'm viewing a lot of relationships through that lens. Isn't the brain trying to, in this prediction pattern, isn't it trying to say, hey, if you get in another relationship, this could happen again, right? So it's trying to avoid that pain. And is there some truth there, like a usefulness of saying, okay, then what are the signs I need to look out for and all these things? And then by doing that, aren't you kind of still perpetuating that trauma? I guess what I'm trying to say is it feels like it's hard to not listen to the lesson of a trauma
Mhm.
without reliving it. I don't know.
So you're saying, I think I was with you. So you're saying, I heard you say when we go through traumatic instances, when,
Uh-huh.
our hearts get broken, let's sort of take war off the table. Let's kind of go back to more ordinary
Sure.
human strife and stress, right?
Sure.
So when our partners, they hurt us or when we get rejected, you're saying, isn't there something that the brain should learn there? And then we should carry with us.
Yeah, and I don't know how to I'm trying not to personalize this because I've told my story so many times the audience is sick of
Why
it.
don't
So
you, no, why don't you personalize? I mean, I'm happy to meet you wherever because I want this to be as useful to people as possible.
like let's say you go through something and there is trauma there, and then you spend so much time avoiding it because you're worried about it happening again, because the trauma is so intense that your goal, you don't want to experience, nobody wants to experience that, right? And
Correct.
so how do you then deal with it with the understanding it can still happen?
Chris, I just got chills. So I feel like, okay, there's so much to unpack here.
Okay.
I'm going to zoom out because I think that's the most, I want to write a little note here.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So let me sort of zoom out here and say, we live in a world where horrific things are done to us. Okay, I mean, just look at the global landscape right now. Childhood trauma is a perfect example of this, right? We have very limited agency in childhood, and our parents can do horrible things to us, even the most well-intended parents, right? So I, as a trauma researcher, I see all the time that horrible things are done to us. Okay, we are having a moment. So I didn't mention this, but I have psychology in my DNA. So I come from a lineage of psychologists.
Wow.
My father is a psychologist. So I have been paying attention, very intense attention to the mental health conversation for, depending on how you want to look at it, 20 some years or 40 some years.
Mm-hmm.
So I've really sort of watched the evolution of us talk about things like, for example, psychological safety. So I think it's incredible. I think a lot of this was sped up by the pandemic. I think it's incredible that people are now talking so much about things like psychological safety. There's no doubt that your brain needs safety for optimal performance.
Mm-hmm.